My name is Billy, and I'm the acting director for the Waakabanes Institute for Indigenous Health. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us today at our recently renewed Waakabanes webinar series, of which we hope to host 4 per year. So keep a lookout for August when we will be scheduling our next presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that, unfortunately, Knowledge Keeper Clay Shirt is not available to be with us today. However, John Wabagijik has kindly offered to step in and open today's session for us. And I'm just going to hand it over.
Ani Boju, Miigwech Billy. John Wabagijik Nadijnikaw, Shishigwaning Dadonjaba, Makwadodeb. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is John Wabagijik. I'm from Shishigwaning First Nation, and my clan is Bear. My spirit name is Chigizis, which means Great Day. So yes, again, welcome everybody, and I'll just open with a small prayer. I'd like to thank the Creator, Gajam Nado, for bringing us all here together virtually, and some of us are here in person. Yes, I'd like to thank the Creator. I'd like to thank Mother Earth for providing for us and for giving us this beautiful day. And I hope everybody enjoys the session. Miigwech, miigwech.
Miigwech, John. A little bit about us. The Waakabanes Institute for Indigenous Health was initiated in 2015 through a generous donation received from Doctors Michael and Amira Dan. The Institute itself is located in Toronto on Dish with One Spoon Treaty Territory at the Dalalana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. And at the Institute, we as researchers and educators from across the university work with Indigenous community partners for wellness through research, education, and service initiatives. Among the successes at the Institute are the students who train with us. And today I'm very pleased that Dr. Jessica Penney will join us to share the work she has been engaging in as a postdoctoral student at the Dalalana School of Public Health. Dr. Jessica Penney is an Inuksiutit Inuk researcher raised in Nunavut, whose work focuses on the intersection of Inuit health, food systems, and environmental issues. Her PhD research at the University of Glasgow focused on the experience of Inuit affected by the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric project in Labrador, Canada, including the impacts of environmental contaminants on Inuit food systems and health risk communications. She is currently a co-investigator on the Inuksiutit Food Sovereignty in Nunavut project, which works with youth and elders to consider how Inuit food choices and food futures are affected by climate change, and to promote the intergenerational transmission of food knowledge, such as butchering, cooking, and fermentation techniques. All aspects of the Inuit culture that I have had the pleasure of being raised within. So thank you, Dr. Penney, for joining us today, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, John and Billy, for that wonderful introduction, and welcome to the start. So yes, I will start a little bit as well with a personal introduction, reiterating, I guess, some of what Billy has mentioned. So the title of the talk today is Inuksiutit, Promoting Inuit Food Sovereignty in Nunavut. So as Billy said, I'm a Inuksiutit Inuk social science researcher, so my background is in sociology. And my research generally focuses on Inuit health and environmental issues broadly. So climate change as well as environmental contaminants. And I'm based here at the University of Toronto at the Waakabanes Price Institute for Indigenous Health. And today I'll be speaking a little bit more about the project mentioned, the Inuksiutit project. So Inuksiutit is a word in the Inuit language that's often used to refer to food from the land. So we call it country food or traditional food, and I'll use that interchangeably. And it translates to that which makes us human. So really speaking to the importance of food for Inuit life. And this project is supported by the Sinuk Grant, which is a partnership between ITK, the National Inuit Organization, UKRI, and Polar Knowledge Canada, and the PIs for this project are based at the University of Aberdeen and York University. So I first want to start out by mentioning that and acknowledging that I'm one person of a much larger team on this project. So we are a collective of Inuit and non-Inuit academics, community-based researchers, Inuit knowledge holders, Inuit elders and young people that are really representing a variety of different specialisms. So everything from country food to public health, social sciences, Inuit knowledge, and Inuit arts as well. This work is, I also want to mention, especially guided by two of our project leaders, Rhoda Katzak from Pond Inlet and Martha Jaw from Inuksutit. So they lead the research in their communities and are really key to determining the direction of the project. So I really see my role in the project as a supporter, using the university research and resources to support Inuit food sovereignty initiatives that come out of that community foundation. And just to provide some background for those of you who are not familiar with Nunavut geography, the two communities that I mentioned are Mikimatalik or Pond Inlet and Inuksutit, which are both located on Baffin Island in Nunavut. So this is where the research takes place. And so, as I mentioned, we're collaborating with partners in two communities where we engage in community-based, qualitative, intergenerational research that's directed at the digital documentation of Inuit country food knowledge. So our aims and objectives for the work include documenting Inuit knowledge around country food, food preparation, food systems, as defined by community members, as well as defining and working towards food sovereignty goals in Inuit Nunavut. And I'll speak a little bit more about food sovereignty in a moment. And also working on knowledge sharing between Inuit and non-Inuit partners and within communities themselves. So a little bit more of a background for those of you who may not be familiar with Inuit food. So this is not a comprehensive list by any means, but I wanted to show some of the diversity of the Arctic food system. So our traditional foods include land mammals like caribou, polar bear, muskox, Arctic hare, sea mammals like seals, whales, walrus, fish and seafood like Arctic char, trout, cod, clams, shrimp, different types of birds like geese, ducks, eggs, ptarmigan, and plants like berries and seaweed and other tundra plants. And these are prepared in a variety of ways. What is available depends on geography, as you saw in that map. Nunavut is a really massive area, and Inuit Nunavut more broadly, the Inuit homelands in Canada, are really a large part of the country. And so the geography and the animals and plants that are available in different areas varies widely. But our foods tend to be eaten either raw, frozen, cooked, fermented, and dried. So any of these foods can be prepared in a variety of ways. So as I mentioned, I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit about that, disentangling food security and food sovereignty. So food is such an important part of Inuit wellness, which I'll be discussing. But a lack of food is an issue that so many people experience in Inuit communities. So we know that 70% of Inuit children live in food insecure homes. So that is really a devastating statistic. But I think that the concept of food sovereignty takes the issue a little bit further and recognizes that the solution for food security, or for achieving food security, lies within communities. So to me, Inuit food sovereignty is the idea that we don't just have the right to have enough to eat, but we also have the right to decide what we eat, how we get our food, and from where we get our food. So that really ties into wider discussions around hunting rights, around co-management of land and waters, and quota systems that exist, and the ability to eat locally sourced foods, and for those foods that we source to be healthy and safe to eat. So in this research, we're working to support three main questions. In what ways do food stories renew bonds with ancestors, uphold community customs, and support healthy eating practices? How are Inuit food choices and possible food futures affected by climate change? How can Inuit knowledge and food stories contribute to greater social understandings of equity, justice, and sustainability in Inuit communities? And then a really important element to this that was mentioned in one of those questions is the issue of climate change. And so the Arctic is warming at more than 2 times the global average. And this, of course, impacts Inuit food in a variety of ways, as outlined by the Inuit Nunavut Food Security Strategy. So one of these important issues is around the quality and availability of animals. So the health of animals is affected by climate change, as well as availability due to changing migration patterns. So for example, I've heard recently about orcas increasing their range into the Arctic, which affects the different whale populations that are desired as food sources and that are traditional food sources in the north. So orcas scaring or chasing or eating narwhal and beluga, which are important sources of food for many Inuit communities. As well, we see sea ice forming later in the year, which reduces the ability to hunt on safe ice, which leads into the next issue of the safety of hunters. So in northern Canada, climate change is leading to shorter winters and unpredictable weather and sea ice conditions that lead to physical dangers for Inuit. So for example, more people can fall through the ice when traveling on snowmobile or with their dog teams due to unpredictable ice conditions. Or travel routes that have been passed down for generations as safe ways to travel on the land and ice are affected by changing ice and weather conditions. So this is climate change and other environmental issues are intricately connected to Inuit food. So in this project, we are trying to put some of those aims and objectives and questions into practice by promoting the intergenerational transmission of country food knowledge between elders and young people, fostering community health and well-being through capacity building in younger generations of Inuit. So we're working on training young people to tell food stories in their community, and advancing local, regional, national, and international understandings of the drivers of food insecurity among Inuit and their connections to climate change. I'll speak about advocacy as well in this presentation. So I'll be giving some of the examples of these action items throughout the presentation. And this photo is of me interviewing Pond Inlet elder Jaco Alulu about the changes to the land and animals that he's seen in the Pond Inlet area in his lifetime. And this photo is from an interview I did with Charlie Inuak in Pond Inlet in May 2023, where we discussed narwhal hunting and the role of hunting in the community and in family life. So he spoke to me about how hunting brings together the whole family. So for example, from hunting seals with his sons to bringing them home and preparing the food and seal skins for use. So he spoke about how that's really important to the whole family unit, which is an important part of community wellness. And leading on from that, Inuit food is really not just about what you eat and physical health, although we know that Inuit food is the most nutritious option in the north, but it also includes other activities that are associated with well-being. So hunting, harvesting, processing, and cooking food. And research on food insecurity in Indigenous communities more broadly discusses how it's essential to respect Indigenous food practices related to harvesting, the sharing and consumption of traditional foods. And that's because food obtained from traditional food systems links the environment and human health, and it really forms the basis of social activity, social cohesion, and integration. And that's really holds true for Inuit as well, as we know that the procurement of traditional food, as well as its preparation and its consumption, has social and cultural significance that's linked to Inuit wellness. So in this way, Inuit food practices align with the holistic model of social determinants of Inuit health that you can see in the model here that was developed by ITK. So a really amazing element of this project is supporting the creation of resources that can be used by others, including to promote healthy traditional food practices amongst young people. So there has been the production of these intergenerational food videos. And so we have a YouTube page. You can see the handle there, IFSNU Inuit Foods. And it has a number of videos, more are still being uploaded, but of young people working with their elders. So for example, this video was filmed by Dana Katzak, and it shows her grandfather, Joshua Katzak, showing how to butcher a bearded seal, and the image you see here is him braiding the intestines. So it's become this really beautiful intergenerational knowledge sharing community archive that includes skill building, equipment, and so filming equipment, and also the results are coming out now. So I encourage you to watch this video and the others, but we've also been working on developing other resources on working with country food. So butchering and cooking tips, recipe cards, and of course other videos that are on our website, which I'll share the link to later. But digital storytelling more broadly has been a really great tool for promoting Inuit food systems in this work. So this is a photo of Martha Jaw cutting a walrus rib. And we found that the documentation and digital storytelling opens up these conversations around food patterns and what people are eating in a way that is more expansive and meaningful than other methods. So for example, dietary surveys. So for example, during the course of filming, the meat, the fat, and the bone, they're all visible and they're all discussed. So it provides this comprehensive discussion of Inuit food uses and preparation techniques that can provide really important, relevant information for historical and contemporary food systems. So what people ate in the past, what they're eating now, and how we can promote more consumption of traditional foods that are really healthy. And in addition to this, our work really also privileges Inuit food knowledge to support food systems. So we take a transdisciplinary approach, everyone coming from their different disciplines, but drawing on the strengths of these different fields and ultimately prioritizing Inuit knowledge of food. And that really enriches the work to make it more applicable to the daily lives of hunters and Inuit who rely on and also prefer country food. And as I mentioned, we have additional resources that have been developed. So we've been developing food sovereignty toolkits to support the transfer of this knowledge. They can be accessed on our website. So that includes toolkits on how to do your own digital storytelling using a cell phone. Also on how to interview or how to speak with hunters or health practitioners in your community about traditional foods. As I mentioned earlier, another element of this work is advocacy. So this work supports community-identified country food advocacy, understanding that Inuit food sovereignty is essential to healthy food systems. And this quote is from a collaborator on our project, Sheila Katzak, and it's her definition of food sovereignty. She says, food sovereignty, for me, is to assert a culture. It is to practice culture, to use it every day. It is deciding what are our rights as Inuit. And so for Sheila, practicing food sovereignty is connected to practicing Inuit hunting rights. It's not a theory, it's a practice. In particular, this quote came from a report that was co-authored by Sheila and Samantha Katzak to provide feedback on consultation as to whether or not ring seal should be added to the list of wildlife species at risk as a species of special concern. And so Sheila identified that the public consultation survey was not available in Inuktitut and that there was a digital divide. So many elders and others might not be able to complete an online survey. So she wanted to ensure that the communication of Inuit knowledge and oral testimony was present. So she and other members of our team worked to film interviews that have been made into an hour-long documentary-like video, as well as a shorter 10-minute video, and also a written report that analyzes the Kossowik process and the impact that designating the ringed seal as a species of special concern would have on Inuit communities. So this is an example of using those research resources to respond to community concerns and support Inuit food priorities. So next I wanted to show a short clip from that Kossowik report. And these are clips from interviews with Sephora Alulu and Regali Utuba about access to traditional foods, cravings, and also their perspectives on rules and regulations on hunting and how it affects traditional food access. So I'm going to play the video now.
Having a lot of craving because, like for example, caribou, nobody's allowed to hunt caribou the way they used to, and they can't hunt polar bear the way they used to because they got quotas. You have to. Only so many are allowed to be killed. Polar bears, caribous are the same thing. There is seasonal only. Well, but when you grew up with those diets, you pray for it, of course. If you were to move up here and never have any southern base, you're gonna crave for even peas. That's what happened to me for a little while when I had to adapt into our world. You crave for what you grew up in. So it's very bodily attachment.
She says she's probably the worst craving country food.
Yeah,
Yeah, when she doesn't have seal meat, she kind of seems to be lost and be. She feels weak. She even feels different in her body. Because she grew up eating seal meat. She might have to move somewhere else if we happen to have no more seal here.
What do you see as the main reasons why people are having these cravings?
legislation.
Yeah.
Biggest thing is legislation, animal rights or whatever. Greenpeace. I don't know who runs these quota things.
Yeah. So it's kind of the rules and regulations that exist around hunting.
Yes.
Like
I'm not sure, but like pond is only allowed like 40 or 60 caribous, or how many caribous a year, and there's like 1,500 of us in pond. That's, of course we're going to have cravings.
And how do you think that impacts the community to be able to access the food that people not being able to access?
Resentment towards the authorities that are imposing those regulations, especially if you are young people. You see that as they're trying to control even our diet. So the mentality is like,
it creates negative feelings.
Yes. Even though everybody knows we grew up in those diets, we crave for that. We're hungry for that. We can't afford the high prices these days. We want just to have meat in the evening. We only have meat in the evenings because we can't afford the high prices, especially in the north. When I go down south, when I see the prices of meat, whoa, we pay 3 times more than that. Like, so it really impacts the nutritional value in our community.
So we've also seen, and throughout this work, seen a research model that's been organically developing that is really collaborative and is also led by Inuit women. So most of the people involved in this work are women. And so responding to their priorities tends to also reflect community and family priorities. And one of these, and I guess more generally, this results in research that responds to community concerns. So one of these priorities is around eating geese and birds. And so avian influenza has been a concern in recent years. So next I'll show a short informational video, which was made by Martha Jaw from King 8 and teaches us about the importance of cooking geese and cooking eggs. So geese and their eggs are really healthy country foods that are enjoyed in communities across the Arctic. But in recent years, some wild birds in the Arctic have been found to carry avian influenza. So in this video, Martha describes how it's now safest to cook geese and their eggs well before eating them, as freezing and drying meat will not kill avian influenza. So now I'll show that short video.
Inuit timmia hakkasuugummata timmiaminillu nihigigattigu timmiamini timmimut ikayutihatsiammata auhatsia nartuharsutik nukihatsia nartuharsutik ammalu timmimut asingitigut ikayutihatsiarsutik nukinnullu sangiyunnartuhatsiarsutik kisianimaanna ippigusutsianersau giahaleratta sila avatigut asijipallianinganam. Maannauluttoq tusahattaleratta timmian hanimmasikahattarninginnik. Aggaarsimakujauvaleratta timmialerigutta aattuguttaluunni. Salummatsiahattarlugillu aattugutivut saviit uluillu. Timmiamineq atangirlugu uujuliarilugu nerijaunginningani aipatittaililugu. Timmiaminit hanuingisiarnartut mamallaqitsutillu. Timmiaminit manningit uutautsiahattariaharmiyut nerijaunginninginni.
So some of those discussions, I'm kind of getting towards the end now, but some of those discussions around, avian influenza, climate change, environmental change more broadly, these are international issues. And so an increasing element of this work is recognizing that because these are international issues, we have to think about advocacy on the, as I said, local, territorial, the national, but also the international stage. So I've been lucky to be part of international advocacy with this project, including attending the Global Indigenous Youth Forum in Rome, which was held at the Food and Agriculture Organization. And that was a really great event focused on youth food sovereignty. And also more recently, the United Nations Permanent Forum on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And so it's been really inspiring to see the solutions for food sovereignty that others are working on and to learn from our shared experiences. So understanding that across the Arctic, Sami are experiencing similar issues to Inuit. And so how can we work together and form partnerships to promote intergenerational food sovereignty across the Arctic, which is going to be some of our focus at the upcoming Arctic Congress in Norway at the end of this month and in early June. So I am coming to a close now, but I wanted to just reiterate the urgency around food security in the North, and that food sovereignty and food security are really prevalent issues and that are at further risk due to climate change and other international issues related to the environment. And that Inuit ways of knowing and being are really essential to achieving that food sovereignty, and that Inuit living in communities have to be the leaders of the initiatives. So I encourage you to access the resources that I spoke about, and more information about our project can be found at the link below there. and feel free to get in touch. And I really look forward to answering any questions. But thank you so much for listening today. And have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Penney. I really appreciate that you took the time to present today. And it was for me, a really important presentation and sharing information about a really important issue. I'm wondering if folks have questions. I would encourage you, if you have any questions, just to pop them into the webinar chat or into the Q&A section. And so I have that open. So if there's any questions that folks have, I can see them. And I will ask them. In the meantime, I do have a question. It's maybe on topic, maybe not. I remember as a child, well, I have two questions. I remember as a child, often we had a collective sort of refrigerator or collective freezer where everyone sort of went hunting and then they brought the food in and then it sort of was held in the collective freezer, and that's where people went. You sort of had, permission to sort of access throughout the year from there. Is that still a practice that's protected and supported, and or is it one that's coming back? Because one of the things that I also remember is that, now people are really sort of directed towards purchasing from, I think it's the Northern store now, but when I was a kid, people really didn't purchase. I remember going with my mom over to people's houses, and they would giggle. My mom would bring food and they would try it, and then they would give us food and everyone would giggle about like trying the different foods, which I really loved. But yeah, I think it was more rare to be purchasing from there. But now I suspect most people, because of the quotas, are sort of directed in that. That's a lot. Just maybe see what your thoughts are on that.
That's a great question. So yeah, community freezers exist in many communities. And they're kind of managed in a variety of different ways. And food is distributed in different ways depending on the community, but that is definitely one source of traditional foods for people who may not, have access to hunters in their family, or yeah, it's one way of sharing food for sure. And in terms of the kind of shift towards buying foods from the stores, you're right that it's becoming more prevalent, especially because of these kinds of increasing quotas and regulations and rules around what can be harvested and when and by who. And so that's something that I've heard, is that especially young people are shifting to diets that are mostly store-bought foods. And so that's part of the intention of this research, is to promote traditional foods to young people and to create these resources where young people can, learn. We have a video on how to butcher a seal. And so, in the future, if a young person needs that resource, it's available to them to be able to prepare and process and cook their own traditional foods.
Very cool. I have a question here. Are there any food innovations or best practices Inuit communities are working on or towards?
That's a really broad question. There's a lot of things that people are working on. If there's anything in particular that you're interested in hearing about, I would be able to maybe narrow it down a little bit, but I can speak to some of the ones that I'm really excited by. I think one of the things that I really like is the emergence of these young hunter programs. So there are programs that take young people from the community out on the land and teach them how to hunt and fish and process the foods. And so I think that's a really fantastic way of promoting wellness amongst young people, promoting traditional foods and promoting physical exercise. And so I think that's a really great type of program that is really holistic in its outlook. So I guess that's one that I really like.
Yeah, that sounds great. I know there's some in the subarctic. There are also a lot of programs now going on to sort of bring hide tanning back into the community and build that. My second question, and then we'll go on to this other question. My second question is, I'm wondering, we see this in sub-Saharan Africa and a lot of research that's taking place there on how to manage crops and indigenous crops as well, but just sort of the use of different forms of technology like geomapping, for instance, or weather technologies. And I'm wondering how and whether, sort of some of the Inuit organizations and research agencies that are led through that kind of, sovereignty and self-determination and research are using those types of technologies to, within their own knowledge systems to be able to improve their self-determination and sovereignty over food.
Yeah, so there is actually, there is something called Siku, and I believe it's an app or a website, and I actually don't know too much about it, but my understanding is that people can, while they're on the land, kind of provide information on the weather conditions or the, what they're observing on the land. And so it becomes this resource for other people who might want to go on the land or to observe climate and environmental change as well. So I think that's a really great use of that technology, because what we're seeing is that changes are happening so quickly that it can become unsafe to be on the land in ways that it wasn't in the past. And so using those types of technologies can hopefully build resources for more safe practice of harvesting and just being on the land more generally.
Yeah, I know that the Mackenzie Valley region is one of the fastest or the most rapid climate change regions within the world, I think, or one of like the most quickly changing. The question that I have here is, since Inuit food sovereignty and security are international issues, I am wondering about your thoughts on the international political conditions. This is a great question, and how they might affect or have already affected food security and sovereignty in Nunavut and broader Arctic spaces. So maybe what are some of the challenges around that?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that what we're seeing, I guess, in recent years as well is more discussion over sovereignty over waterways in the Arctic, and more interest from different countries in crossing, for example, the Northwest Passage and using it for shipping, and who owns that. In my opinion, it's Inuit land and Inuit waters, but there are different political implications to an increasingly open Arctic with less ice. And so in recent years, we've seen an increase in marine traffic, in shipping, in cruise ships, in navigating Arctic waters, and that does have an impact on food and food security. And so we've heard from hunters, not just myself, but many researchers and hunters have been speaking about how the increase in marine traffic is affecting whales and seals and other animals. And so, yeah, that's, I think, something that needs a lot more attention and a lot more presence within discussions around Arctic sovereignty within what's currently known as Canada.
And maybe just to add to that, if you would like to, can you speak to the kind of status that Inuit people have within those conversations? I think they're an observer status. Is that correct, within those categories, and not a sovereign governing body? Is that, or has that changed?
Yeah, I can't speak with absolute certainty, but I believe that it's the Inuit Circumpolar Council, which is the international Inuit organization, that would have that observer status. Alongside, we would hope that I would hope that the national or the member states would consider their truth and reconciliation, requirements within thinking about how they might advocate for Inuit at those kinds of international settings, and thinking about how important it is for us to have sovereignty over our lands and waters.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Do folks have some more questions? So I'm not seeing any additional questions. I'd like to, again, thank Dr. Penney. Maybe ask you what's your favorite meal to eat when you're home?
I would say that my favorite food in the world is Arctic char. I love fish and I love Arctic char. It's really the best. And I'm lucky that there's actually an organization in Toronto that sells it called First Fish, so I can access it here as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's some good knowledge. I might go and take a look at that. Is it from the north, the First Fish?
They work with hunters and fishers in Nunavut, so it's sourced from Nunavut.
Incredible. There used to be something that someone made when I was little, that they would have the fish and then they would mash in some other ingredients. I don't know or remember what they were, but I can still taste it. And I haven't tasted it since I was little, but I like every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I wish I could figure out what that was. So yeah, there was a lot of delicious food when I was little. So thank you again. And I'm just going to check to see if this is a question. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting to hear about food sovereignty work and how it relates to climate change and changing political situation in the Arctic with melting ice. So yeah, thank you very much, Alex. So again, Dr. Penney, it was a real pleasure to have you here today. And I hope that everyone does have the chance to take a look at the videos. I think I've seen most of them now, and they're very informative. And it's great to see how Indigenous knowledge systems and Inuit knowledge systems are being used to sort of progress research in the region around how to, encourage food sovereignty and sort of reinstitute rights over food that haven't existed over the past, I think probably 50 years, if not more. I'm going to close us off now because I don't see any other questions. And wish everyone a wonderful day. And maybe Dr. Penney, if you can just stay on for a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Chimigwech, Dr. Penney, for that wonderful presentation. I'll just close us off with a few words. I'd like to ask the Creator to continue to keep us safe, healthy, and our families, and also to ask to continue to guide us in a good way in the work that we do with our community and with our partners and with everyone. So I'd like to say Chimigwech.